Recording. Take yourself off the picture. Ooh, okay. Take yourself off camera if you're feeling uncomfortable or if at any point. Also remember self-care when you teach these topics and also for your students. See? Problem ready. Okay. So please remember self-care today and always, actually. Okay, so before we get started, I want to talk about guidelines and some classroom norms that we may have. So let's put in the chat if you have any classroom norms or guidelines. So for example, one mic, one person speaks at a time. Please type in chat some other norms you may have or guidelines to help keep everybody healthy and safe in the classroom. So for example, I use the one stand up, sit back. Maybe in some other classes you stand up, and in these topics you might sit back, or vice versa. Sometimes you want to stand up when other times you sit back. Always we can share the stories. I mean, we can share the lessons learned from these types of workshops or the lessons learned when we're in classes, but we don't share the specifics or anything to deal with people's names. What else are some other good guidelines? Anybody have other good guidelines? I'm hoping everybody sets standards as they enter into their classroom or work with youth. Okay, I can still see who's coming in on participants. Oh, the right to
see the chat. Okay, I'm just making sure you can see the chat.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, the right to pass is also another great one. At any point, anybody in class can always pass. I think that's awesome. Elmo, yes, enough. Let's move on. Absolutely. I like to do ouch and oops. So if something bothers you, you can just say ouch and the other person can say oops. And we can decide whether we want to address it more at the time. We're also going to respect other people's opinions and their experiences, especially when they differ from ours. Don't yuck my yum. Yes, love that. Everybody can see the chat, right? We're good. But I think that it's really important. One of the keys to me is that a lot of growth happens with our students when they're able to share their experiences. So I don't want to undermine, or I want to give plenty of time for people to set their guidelines in the classrooms or wherever they are. All right, awesome. Okay, let me close the chat for a second. In terms of going through today, at any time, please put your questions in the chat. I think it's more important that I address your questions than necessarily get through all my notes. So please feel free to ask questions. And Jordan, if you will help me monitor the chat, that would be fabulous. Okay, let me see if I can move the chat out of the way. Is your chat in the middle of the screen for you all?
Nope, you're good. Just seeing your PowerPoint.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so today we're going to talk about what is consent, some tools and activities in teaching consent, how to have conversations about consent, and a lot of follow-up activities such as when am I ready, healthy relationships, and decision-making. I want to tell you that my goal for today is really that you walk away with tips and techniques for how that you can use in your toolbox for talking to teens about consent. So the goal is that you end up with a bunch of tools that you can use whenever for your population or whenever you need them. Okay, so imagine we're in person because normally, ideally, that's where we are. And I would do this activity, I'm gonna call it finger to finger. I do it with kids, I do it with adults, I do it with many different populations. So just humor me for a second. And it goes something like this. Stand up, find a partner in the room. All right, put your right thumb to right thumb, left pointer to left pointer, right toe to right toe. Switch partners, go find another partner. Okay, right thumb to right thumb, right elbow to right elbow, left elbow to left elbow. Switch partners. Maybe we get a little faster. Right elbow to right elbow, left elbow to left elbow, right toe to right toe. Switch partners. Right elbow to right elbow, left elbow to left elbow, nose to nose. And then we talk about what just happened. So I can tell you in debriefing this, since I've done dozens of times, it goes something like this. I can say, wow, I heard some things that happened when I said nose to nose. I heard some giggles. I heard some people saying no. What else did we hear in the room? And people share. We talk about what we saw. I saw some people lean in to go for the nose, and I saw some people lean out. I saw some people jump, and we talk about what we saw. And finally, we talk about, for people that did go in, how did you go in for nose to nose? And people will share, they looked each other in the eye, maybe gave each other a signal, or they eventually went in for the nose to nose. Interestingly enough, doing this during COVID has added a whole new layer because everybody's even more sensitive about space and going nose to nose. But it's a great activity for us to even start to understand what consent is before we even mention the word consent. And finally, I talked to the students or the adults even about how this felt and what their feelings were and how did they know what their partner wanted? How did they know what they wanted? And we spent some time talking about their feelings. Did they have time to think about how they felt? Did they just follow directions? Did they just go with what they thought was expected of them? So the finger-to-finger activity, it's really hard to do over the webinar, but I hope you understand that this is a great tool to introduce consent, and it really leads to thoughtful conversations. Okay, my finger-to-finger. Okay, so I want to talk about consent and not just in the sexual manner. Once again, I want to start with being able to talk about consent, about the definition of what consent is. Hold on, I have this chat bar in the middle of my screen, so I can't even read. So I use this. This is from Everyday Feminism. It's a comic strip. Let me just read it. Want to watch Pulp Fiction? Sure. Half an hour later, I'm not really liking this. Let's do something else. No, you said you'd watch the movie, so you're staying until it's done. Obviously, it talks about the ability to change your mind. I used to work for a very progressive independent school in New York City, and I find that the students are overly people pleasers, and but also knew some of the habits of like a play date, even as they got into their teens. And so the whole discussion of, would you make a friend watch a movie if they didn't want to watch the movie anymore? And how does that work? Hey, okay, here we go. I really like that Fluffy Bunny's new song, In the Middle of the Night. Ugh, what the hell? You said you liked the song. Yeah, but I don't want to listen to it while I'm sleeping. Again, because we consent to an activity, it's the timing of the activity, maybe the location of the activity, maybe even the frequency of the activity. Once again, just additional ways to talk about consent without talking about sexual activities. And finally, let me see, I can't see my pictures. Whoops, sorry. I bought the cards. Now I can teach you poker. Cool. A short time later, now that I know the rules, I don't think the game is for me. You can't invite me to play cards. I can't see the screen exactly. And then not play the cards. You owe it to me. And once again, I teach the kids, it's really important to understand your actions may piss people off. They may be disappointed. They may hurt other people's feelings. You may lose a friend. It may hurt the relationship. And all those things to me are better than being sexually assaulted or raped. So we talk about that we might not be friends with everybody, that it might happen you hurt someone's feelings. And that entire discussion, I find, takes a class period with the students because in a lot of cases, they are so used to, like I said, pleasing others and keeping friendships. And then I explain that that might not always be the case and that you might disappoint people, and that's okay too. Okay, let's get to some sexual consent topics. So I've selected a few videos. We're not going to watch the whole videos. We're just going to watch little snippets of them. Once again, more tools for you to use, either for you to preview in advance or for you to show to the classes. The first one, teen consent. This one's been around for a while. A lot of kids have seen it, but I think it's really important. So, let me get there. Whoops, did I lose the sharing? Jordan?
Yeah, you're no longer sharing your screen at the moment.
Okay, here we go. Okay. Here's a little bit of the tea video.
They might say, yes, please. That's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious.
Okay, so first, if I had my way, I'd wave a magic wand and everybody would have the same terms and understanding so that we could have better communication. That's not the case. So these videos can help the students use some terms and understanding. So for example, do you want tea? They start to use the tea metaphor to help with consent conversations. I don't mean in any way to belittle the conversations by comparing consent to wanting tea, but it's a great metaphor for the students to use and to have an introduction and get used to the language. I'm a firm believer that the more they're able to talk about sex in general and consent, the better conversations they will have, better communication they will have, more respect, and we can reduce sexual assault and rape. So this one, of course, goes into, again, changing their mind. I remind students that, let's say you have a free, which means the parents aren't home, you go to somebody's house, you have a plan, you've agreed to have sex, you say you're going to have sex. We will define sex in 1 minute. You say you're going to have sex, you get there, you're all ready, and you change your mind. It's okay to change your mind when you get there. You can start kissing, making out, change your mind. You can get naked and still change your mind. You can start intimate sexual activity and still change your mind. At any point, you're entitled to change your mind, and at any point, your partner needs to respect you. That was just a reminder of that. And of course, unconscious people don't want tea. The reason why we mention this one is that sometimes when they start having sex, they're not unconscious. They may be conscious, and then they become unconscious. And we talk about, at that point, you must stop. We will talk a little bit about drinking and alcohol or other substances in general, but certainly if someone was conscious and now they're not conscious, you need to stop having any type of sex and get them help, ideally. So that's the tea video. I saw my students year after year, so I needed to have other videos other than just the tea video. The tea video goes into lots of other great details. But the next video is the bike riding video, similar to the tea video, except it adds this one area.
Maybe your fellow cyclist is totally cool with biking on paved roads. That does not mean that they're up for extreme mountain biking. You're not going to insist that they go speeding down a mountain with you if they are only interested in paved roads. That's uncomfortable territory, and you don't want to pressure your bike partner, do you?
So I love the phrase uncomfortable territory. So maybe somebody's comfortable with vaginal sex, but not comfortable with anal sex. Maybe somebody's comfortable with anal sex and not comfortable with oral sex. Maybe somebody's comfortable with, vaginal sex, but not certain fetishes. So it's important to ask at each event, and it needs to be ongoing. I like the phrase uncomfortable territory because once students start using it, it might be something that they want to try in the future. It doesn't say never. It just says that right now, this is uncomfortable territory. And it's a phrase that I find students can start to use. And they refer to this the bicycle example in future discussions I have with them. So I like the uncomfortable territory. But anyway, the cycling one is very similar to the T one. It's just year after year, I needed something new. Okay, the third one. Okay, this is a little different than the last two. Let's watch it and then I will talk a little bit about it.
We need a new model. I'm here today to offer you that new model, and it's based on pizza. Now, pizza is something that is universally understood and that most people associate with a positive experience. So let's do this. Let's take baseball and pizza and compare it when talking about three aspects of sexual activity: the trigger for sexual activity, what happens during sexual activity, and the expected outcome of sexual activity. So, when do you play baseball? You play baseball when it's baseball season and when there's a game on the schedule. It's not exactly your choice. So if it's prom night or a wedding night or at a party, or if our parents aren't home, hey, it's just batter up. Can you imagine saying to your coach, not really feeling it today. I think I'll sit this game out. That's just not the way it happens. And when you get together to play baseball, immediately you're with two opposing teams. One playing offense, one playing defense. Somebody's trying to move deeper into the field. That's usually assigned to the boys. Somebody's trying to defend people moving into the field. That's often given to the girl. It's competitive. We're not playing with each other. We're playing against each other. And when you show up to play baseball, nobody needs to talk about what we're going to do or how this baseball game might be good for us. Everybody knows the rules. You just take your position and play the game. But when do you have pizza? Well, you have pizza when you're hungry for pizza. It starts with an internal sense, an internal desire or a need. I could go for some pizza. And because it's an internal desire, we actually have some sense of control over that. I can decide that I'm hungry, but know that it's not a great time to eat. And then when we get together with someone for pizza, we're not competing with them. We're looking for an experience that both of us will share that's satisfying for both of us. And when you get together for pizza with somebody, what's the first thing you do? You talk about it. You talk about what you want. You talk about what you like. You may even negotiate. Have you?
So I like this one in the sense that I don't normally show it to students unless I'm doing a homework assignment or something, but it's really helpful. First of all, the baseball analogy is completely misogynistic, completely, homophobic. It's not good. It's not good on many, 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 many levels. So we talk about not using the baseball analogy anymore. The good news is that I'm not finding the students talking too much baseball analogy. But in explaining why it's not a good analogy, they start to realize how bad that analogy is. And pizza becomes really easy for them to talk about. So you could say like, hey, I'm in the mood for mushroom. Are you? Oh, you're feeling like pepperoni? Let's go half and half. Or, hey, I'll do mushroom tonight. You want to do pepperoni next week? And there's a discussion, maybe a little bit of a negotiation as he talks about. And even people who've been ordering pizza for a long time might say, hey, are you up for the normal or should we try something a little different tonight? So the discussion about how we do consent and navigation around other topics other than sex can help in our discussions about sex. Pizza analogy is also really good when I talk to adults who are a little concerned about talking about consent. We talk about pizza and then they begin to understand, yeah, this is important. And we do that in our everyday lives. So I like the pizza analogy. Let's define sex for a second. Sometimes I spend an entire class period talking about how to define sex. I think, once again, it's really important that we know what the words that we use mean and how we use them. So we start with how we define sex, and after maybe half an hour, this is a typical definition they come up with: two or more people I say the class has to deal with people only. Today, I'm going to talk about two people. Two or more people engage in an intimate act using at least one pair of genitals. That tends to be a good definition. That includes a lot of different versions of sex. They tend to leave masturbation out of it. They want sex to include two or more people. Sounds like a good working definition. And so that's the definition we come up with sex. And then we get into the topic about virginity. Once we start realizing that it's hard to define virginity, I kind of joke with them, do you lose virginity? Where did it go? Can you find it? Did you give it away? Did you get it back? The whole virginity term is another term. While we stop using the baseball analogy, I'd love for everyone to stop using the virginity analogy. It really goes into bad power plays. And really just not a good term to use. And I explain to the students and we talk about it and they begin to understand why that is also not a good term. And if they had originally defined virginity as someone with, penis, vagina, intercourse sex, then what happens with two penis people? Do they ever lose their virginity? Or two people with vulvas that engage in intimate acts? Do they lose their virginity? So they realize what a bad and useless term that is. If you want to say you had sex last night, name it, say what it is, say that I had vaginal sex for the first time. I'm not opposed to people sharing, although I don't love that idea, but I'm opposed to the word virginity. So if we can get rid of virginity and get rid of the baseball paradigm, I think we'll be doing much better. And come up with some words and how we're defining sex. So when we talk to students, we all have a clear understanding about what we're talking about. Okay, and the final video is Lacey Green. She's much more for college. I don't know how much about her you may know. I take a lot of her stuff and then make it all age appropriate. But these are ways to actually ask for consent when the students say, how do you really do that? Here are some ways.
Are you enjoying yourself? How does that feel? Do you like that? Do you want me to keep going? How far do you want to go? You look uncomfortable. Are you okay? Good consent is basically just checking in. It's paying attention to someone's body language, how they're doing. It's keeping those lines of communication open so that everyone's on the same page and everyone feels safe and comfortable, which means this is not how you ask for consent. Nope. Come on, I thought you liked me. I promise you'll like it. Just do it for me. What's the big deal? We've had sex before. I'm so horny right now. You liked it last weekend. Douchebag alert! Also, potential rapist alert. Rapists often see sex as something that's owed to them. Sex is never something that's owed to someone. Doesn't matter if you've been flirting, if you hooked up before, if they bought you dinner, not even if you're naked. Pushing someone until they finally give in is not consent because you're basically not giving the option to say no. So how can you know if someone is consenting once you ask? Yes, please. Oh man, that feels so good. Keep going. I'm down for anything in these areas, but not these areas. Yeah, right there. Why, yes, I would like that. Notice how consent is a clear yes. It's enthusiastic. I want it. It's out loud and there's no doubt in your mind. And remember, consent can always be retracted. So if you feel like the vibes have kind of changed or you're unsure, getting mixed signals, you want to check in. This is what no might sound like. I don't like that. Can you stop? I'm not ready for this. Can we slow down for a second? I'm not into this anymore. I guess if you want me to. Please don't. Just because someone doesn't say no doesn't mean they're saying yes. They might feel uncomfortable or guilty or not know how to say it. So that is why it's really important to hear that verbal out loud yes. And if they're being quiet, ask them, hey, how you doing? What's up? How's it going? Everything okay? And that, my dears, basically in a nutshell, is how you practice good consent.
I think she's pretty self-explanatory. Lacey Green has a lot of videos on a lot of pertinent, important topics. I find her a great resource for mostly college age students that is the least accurate. But I do encourage students when we talk about it is that we work together in groups and we make our own list of ways to ask and ways to answer. And so that's also one of these activities that I do is ways of saying yes, ways of saying no, ways of asking, just so that we practice using that vocabulary and those terms. Okay, let me go back. Okay, so by this point, oh, let's push play. By this point, they should be able to come up with a good definition for consent. Here's where we typically get to. Consent is permission or agreement to engage in any activity, but in particularly sexual activity. It's always voluntary. It's clear and unambiguous. It can be verbal, doesn't have to be verbal. It's revocable at any point. It's mandated by law to be discussed with each activity and ongoing. And it's expressed by people who are able to give consent, which I will get to. Consent is not the absence of no. As we know, yes means yes. We want people to get comfortable saying yes and no. And it's about respect and communication. So at this point, it's good.
Sorry to interrupt you. We can still see the YouTube video. We can't see your presentation.
Oh,
It might work if you stop sharing and then reshare the presentation. I'm not sure how to flip-flop back and forth though.
okay. Stop sharing and share screen. Thank you for letting me know. Better?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. So 8 people who are able to give consent and can't give consent. So first, it's a good time to note there's no national definition for consent. There's no national definition for rape, no national definition for sexual assault. All of them are defined state by state. And you get to colleges, even college by college. So it makes things a little bit more challenging. It is important to know the state laws. But I definitely don't believe that just telling students what the laws are. Some people may say, okay, I'm not going to do it, but certainly the alcohol, you can't drink until you're 21, doesn't necessarily stop them. Marijuana is not necessarily legal. All these things don't necessarily change behavior. And we certainly learn from all the abstinence only programs or just say no to alcohol that doesn't work. So knowing the law to me is not enough to change behavior. It might change behavior for some, but not enough. So the age of consent is one part of the law. The other part of the laws tend to be, it doesn't say that you need to be sober, but you can't be drunk or intoxicated. And we talk to students about how do you know? How do you know what 1 drink does? How do you know what 2 drinks does? How do you know what it does for your partner? How do we know how long it takes for the drugs or the alcohol to work on the system? Could they have been more sober when you started and now they're more intoxicated? So I kind of like to say that sober sex is best sex. Ideally, once you start drinking or using any type of substances, your ability to make healthy decisions deteriorates. So ideally, sober sex is best sex. I get the question all the time, what happens when 2 people are really, really drunk? Well, the truth is by law, either one of them could be accused of sexual assault or rape. 2 underage students, 2 underage people, either one could be accused of statutory rape. So it goes into healthy decision-making. We can talk more about that. I always get those questions. But in general, I want to also get to the idea that consent is a low bar. I really appreciate that as a country, we worked hard to put consent laws into place, but it's really a low bar. I'm hoping that we can all do better about helping everyone to have communication about sex, and that consent is really a bare minimum, that it should be legally consensual. Here, I feel obligated to show the slide. Here is the age of consent. Like I said, I don't love it, and the laws are kind of tricky. In New York, there are some Romeo and Juliet laws if people are close in age, but really I say to students all the time, if you're getting that close and you're worried about the law, maybe you shouldn't be engaging in that type of activity. But there is an age of consent in each state. And here it is. I don't find that the kids always want to know it, but I don't find that this slide helps them to make healthier decisions, to be honest. Okay, so this is another point just to remind everyone to use self-care. I find that when we talk about the laws, that grown-ups standing in front of students trying to define or defend laws is not so effective. I've even had law professors come in, and it doesn't make it much clearer to the kids. I find what is helpful is I divide them into small groups. I hand out articles and they discuss some cases. In discussing these legal cases, they come up with their own opinions about the law, about what fair is, about what works and what doesn't work. A note that it'll take me a bunch of time to prepare articles that I find go into enough detail that we can discuss that aren't too graphic. The 3 cases I pulled out today happen to be male on female rape cases, but I always include a variety when I do it in schools, in our classrooms. But it is a trick to pull up enough of an article that makes sense to discuss that isn't too graphic, but it can still be really helpful to teach. What else can I tell you about these articles? Okay, so the first one, the Columbia University mattress case, you're probably familiar with it. According to Emma Solkowitz, by the way, when I present these cases originally, I will use words like accused and accuser so that they are presented to the students as neutral as possible. By the time they are done discussing the cases amongst themselves and then they present them to the class, they are often using words like survivor and rapist, but I try to present them as neutral as possible so they can come to their own conclusions and discuss it as a group. I'm a huge advocate. The more they own these decisions and these thought processes, the better it is, because me just telling them to follow the law really, I don't think works. Anyway, so Emma Solkowitz was at Columbia. Her story is that she had had consensual vaginal sex with this gentleman twice before and was engaged in consensual vaginal sex. He asked for anal sex. She said no. He continued and they had anal sex. That's her version. His version is that she consented to anal sex. She called it the Carry That Weight Project and took her mattress, her 50-pound mattress with her around to all her classes and to graduation at Columbia to protest lots of things. But one of them is that sexual assault or rape happens close to either where the survivor lives or close to where the rapist lives, and that this can happen in your own dorm room. I use this case to remind students that just because someone says yes to one activity does not mean they're saying yes to all activities. But we talk about this case. This is the only, sometimes we do the Brockner case, but normally this is the only college case. I tend to try to pick cases of younger people involved. St. Paul's case. St. Paul's a private school. The senior salute is traditionally when boys hook up with freshman girls. It tends to be having vaginal intercourse. Sometimes they say it's taking their virginity. They tried in the lawsuit to say it's just about kissing. I'm not a believer in that, but that is what was stated in the case. And so in this case, a boy asks a girl to go to a mechanic's room, like a boiler room. She believes she's going there for kissing only, and she goes consensually to the room. It's his intention from the senior salute, my belief anyway, is to engage in sex. This is the way her story goes. Her story is they had sex, she did not consent to it. His version is he had an erection, condom in hand, had divine intervention. God said, don't do it. And he didn't have sex with her. One of the reasons why I bring up this case is afterwards, there's a series of texts. She said, did you use a condom? He wrote back, are you on the pill? I think you're okay. I put it on halfway through. And so I bring this case up to help students remind and to think about that, for them to think about how texting and the internet may play a part in not only the relationships are breaking up, but also sexual assault cases. In this case, he was actually sentenced to a year in prison. 5 years probation. He had to register as a sex offender and $15,000 bail. As we know, I mean, we could talk about sexual assault and rape cases in a different day. We know many cases don't even make it to the courts, all that type of stuff. But I like the students to take some time to discuss the cases. Steubenville case. This case is really about social media because the victim or survivor, she doesn't have any recollection of the events. And one of the reasons why this one hit the media was because there were pictures circulated. So people in the room took pictures of the naked body, of her naked body, and sent it around. And it was the pictures that helped bring about the case because she had no recollection. And one of the sentencing for the boys was stronger because he also sent around nudes, and that was included in the allegations. In this particular case, what they were accused of, rape in this state, included digital hands going into the vulva. So that's also another example of, depending upon what state you're in, how we define rapist really makes a difference. This was 2 high school boys that raped a 16-year-old girl. Oh, also in the senior salute case, because the girl was 15, she was underage, really played a part in that case. And so that also talks more about statutory rape and people understanding how the age of consent does play a part in the law. So I encourage talking about cases with consent, without consent, but I understand that it can be challenging and that I just say handle it with care, but I do think it's important that students discuss the law. So I think consent is really a low bar. I've mentioned that a few times. It's really about, do you and your partner want to be there? Does your partner want to be engaging in these activities? Consent looks different for each person. Part of the trauma-informed consent is we need to find out what phrases are comfortable for our partner. Different phrases for different people may feel comfortable, different phrases may be uncomfortable. We need to know how to ask, we need to know how to listen, and we need to know how to talk to our partners about consent. There are phrases like affirmative consent, enthusiastic consent. I think they're well-intentioned, but I find that it adds confusion for the students. I think really basically our job is to help reduce ambiguity and help reduce confusion. And so the answer is really more communication, practice communication, help with communication. Once again, one of the basic things is I think we need some more lessons on anatomy so that we can feel comfortable saying penis and vulva when talking about the parts of our body. 2 ideas for games are we play the penis and the vulva game. We say penis quietly and then louder, 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 and then we're screaming penis, same with vulva, just to help the comfort with these words or any words you think might feel uncomfortable to the students. I also do a penis vulva ear game. I put up on the board 3 words, penis vulva ear, and give them pens and they go around and put as many nicknames as they can. It serves many purposes, but one, they see some of the problems with some of the nicknames for these body parts. And they also see like why there are no nicknames for ear. And we talk about how there's so many nicknames for penis and vulva because people are uncomfortable talking about it and why they're uncomfortable talking about these body parts. And then we also talk about what some of the nicknames mean, where they came from. It's also helpful. I was talking to an 8th grader and I said the word oral sex and they thought oral sex meant talking about sex. So I think it's really important that we define what these words mean, including nicknames. I also think that we talk about consent. It's more than just having a seat at the table. We want to empower people and to have conversations. And so I think being able to know your body, know what a vulva is, know your own vulva, be able to know what it looks like, how it feels, is really empowering to people to be able to talk about consent and not just having a seat at the table. These are some activities that may be useful for you. So we talk about brainstorming areas of consent outside of sexual consent, particularly with the younger students. I'll say, what are some ideas for consent? And they will come up with things like, oh, my friend pushed me in the pool. That wasn't consensual. Somebody pulled my hair. That wasn't consensual. A teacher touched me on the shoulder. That was touch without consent. And we brainstorm, we work in groups. I think that's a useful activity, once again, to start talking about consent in a non-sexual manner. Round of yeses and round of nos. We practice, I might say, can I put my elbow on your ear? And we go through an entire way of saying yes. Everybody says yes in a different manner, so we can get comfortable for different versions of yes. Yes, I'd like that. Yes, thank you. Yes, please. That sounds good. Just like Lacey Green had a whole bunch of ways. And we practice saying no and all the ways of saying no. And we practice all those different ways. That's a helpful activity. Developing social media samples. I love this one. They're into TikTok. Let them make a TikTok about consent. 15-second about consent. Pick a topic and let them do TikToks, any type of social media activity. Non-verbal communication activity. That looks like something like you stand facing each other and you ask the person to move towards you or stop. Take a step back and stop. And so in a totally quiet room, students can get used to looking at each other in the eyes and paying attention, and also learning a little bit more about space and where people are comfortable. I do this one, oh, interesting. We stand in a line and we do a whole round where people talk and you can only say, oh, interesting. And so it encourages the other partner to continue to speak, and while you just listen. It's a great way to practice communication skills. You can only say, oh, interesting. Then we rotate partners and we add things like you can only ask a question and still say, oh, interesting. Once again, it's about practicing communication skills, about asking questions and listening to answers. Okay. How are we doing in time? Because I think we're getting close. Okay, here are some follow-up activities that I think are really important. So these are the types of conversations I wish we were having instead of so much talking about consent, to be honest. Things about how do I know when I'm ready for each sexual activity. So I want to spend time before going to the party, before I engage and say, what am I in the mood to do? Like going back to the pizza discussion. What do I want? I encourage students to take the time and say, what do I want? I'll tell you a little story. I had a 10th grade girl come in on a Monday morning and she tells me about a new partner. She said she had sex with a partner over the weekend. So the first thing I said was it consensual? I wanted to make sure I wasn't dealing with a sexual assault case. And she said, yes. And I said, great. And then I said, did you enjoy yourself? And she said, enjoy myself? I'm like, yeah, did you want to be there? She said, did I want to be there? I said, well, why did you have sex? She said, well, it was the next thing to do. And I was thinking, okay. So that was one part of the discussion about when do you want to have sex and why they engage in sex. There's more to the story. So then I say to her, did you enjoy it? She says, well, I don't know. And I said, well, did your partner enjoy it? Yes, he enjoyed it. Okay. And I said, did your partner think you enjoyed it? She said, yes. And I said, why? She said, because she moaned the entire time. And I said, did you moan because that's what you felt like? She said, no, I moaned because my last boyfriend said I didn't enjoy sex because he never heard me moan. So I decided this time to moan the entire time. She and I had a discussion that chances are her previous boyfriend had watched a lot of pornography and thought that the second you touch your partner, they moan. And that's not exactly the case. Some may moan, some may not moan. Which brings me to the last point on here, pornography. I do entire porn classes where we do porn sex versus real sex. Right now, unfortunately, they're using pornography for sexual education. And we know that there's a lot more choking and violence in pornography. Forget what it even does to the actors in the pornography, but just as the recipient, as somebody watching it. And we spent an entire class talking about the impact of pornography. Oh, I can say a lot more about pornography. But anyway, that's a topic unto itself, the impact of pornography on the students. I think that's a really important topic. Getting back to the when am I ready? I think we sit and we discuss that reasons to have sex or engage in any activity is not because you want to be polite, is not because you want to please the other person, is not because you're afraid of something worse happening. And we talk about all the reasons to engage. We talk about pleasure, we talk about what is it you want, and taking the time to think internally about what you want. I also tell them to make a plan, like when they're going to a party, both with alcohol or drugs or sexual activity. If they say to their friends, like, tonight I'm going to hook up with so-and-so, then if they disappear into the room, it's okay. If they made a plan and it's the wrong person or something that wasn't on their plan, maybe it'll help their friends intervene, which is my bystander interventions. I run a whole class on bystander interventions, and the students brainstorm all different ways of interrupting potential sexual assault problems, because there's a high likelihood that someone will be there or have witnessed somebody leaving the room, leaving the party, and may have an opportunity to help prevent a sexual assault. And we talk about people's own values, about whether they believe that they should go and interact or interrupt. For example, if it's somebody's camp friend, if it's a friend of a friend, if they don't know the people, if they do know the people. And we talk about a lot of different scenarios, so that by the end, they've had some practice and spent some time thinking about their own values about when to intervene. One of my favorite classes is the intimacy class. I put out a list of 10 or 15 things. People rank them in terms of what they find more intimate. This opens up fabulous discussions. It's a great activity. I find time and time again, they will say that lying together naked is more intimate than engaging in oral sex. And we will have an entire discussion about what it means to the students to engage in oral sex and why that's not such an intimate act anymore. They will say things like, well, it's only one person, or only one person is naked. They have a whole list. But the intimacy activity is a great activity to do. I found fruitful discussion. By the way, with teaching over COVID and over the internet for the past 2 years, some of these activities are much better in person. Some of them work okay over the internet. Of course, healthy relationships, you all know about healthy relationships and regular decision-making. I just think that those two classes cannot be taught enough for everybody involved for obvious reasons. Trying to think. Are there anything else? What didn't I mention? What are some questions? Are there questions in the, Jordan, are there questions in the chat?
Yes, we've had a couple come through that I recorded down for you. This was referring back to the baseball pizza video, and someone asked, what is your reasoning for why you don't usually show that video to students?
Good question. First of all, that particular one tends to be very long. There's not a bad reason to show it. It tends to be long and the kids don't tend to stay that interested in it. But there's nothing wrong in that video. I've had him come and do presentations for schools before. He's great, Al B. So there's nothing wrong with it. I'd watch the whole thing. He has a few of them. You can pick a different one. But there's nothing wrong with the video.
Thank you. Another question that came through, and really quick, please feel free to continue sending your questions. You can send them to me directly if you don't want others to see, or you can put them in the chat. I'll make sure they get covered. But someone asked, when discussing the cases without consent with students, do you also provide the state laws for the places that the cases occurred?
Yes, we talk about them. We talk about the age of consent and sometimes the definitions for rape. I used to go through all the definitions for rape and sexual assault per state, and they're kind of arduous and kind of painful, and I'm not a lawyer. So we tend to at least state like what the case is, like whether it's rape or sexual assault and what's included in that level, whether it's like rape in the 3rd degree or statutory rape. So we do talk about that version, it becomes too cumbersome to talk about all the different, and we get lost in questions that I can't answer. There's a lot of why questions, like why is it that age, or why does it include, you know, the broomstick is included in some laws, but not other laws. And I can't answer a lot of the why questions. But yeah, I do discuss the definition in that state. Yeah.
Thank you. In a similar vein, how would you suggest describing the age of consent in a trauma-informed way?
Yeah, when I think trauma-informed way, I think just that a lot of things are going to feel comfortable to one person. The age of consent, man, I wish we could just take rid of the age of consent. It's such a bad, I'm not really sure how to do that in a trauma-informed way. I don't have a great answer for that. Does anybody else have a great answer for that? I mean, I just think that it's really unfortunate that, oh, and if I didn't mention it somewhere, always mention RAIN, Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, and the 800 line, that should always go somewhere, so that people who don't want to talk in class, and also of course have additional resources. I also think it's really important that students, whether they talk to a teacher, a professional, or a psychologist, a parent, an aunt, that they have some adult, and I do help them brainstorm to find an adult that they are comfortable talking to, sexual assault or anything. I just think that navigating all this by themselves is really unfortunate, which is, I guess, why we do the work that we do. Is there another question?
Yes. Someone said, can you go into some more details on discussing being inebriated while participating in sexual activities and how you discuss that with teens?
Yeah, oops. So both things I think are true. So the law is kind of funny, right? Being drunk or not being sober is never a defense for your actions. So if somebody raped or sexually assaulted, another person, and they say I was really drunk or I was high, does not get them off. That's never an excuse for the law. And conversely, interestingly enough, if somebody is drunk or intoxicated or not sober, they're not legally able to consent. So I can understand why that confuses students, and I can understand why students don't see the logic in that. And I explain, part of that is just the law. That's just the way it is. That's why I don't like all those why questions about the law. And it takes somebody to initiate sex. Like, two people can't be passed out drunk and still have sex. Somebody needs to be coherent enough to have sex actually happen. Two people drunk is a really bad decision. There's no other way to explain that other than once you've started drinking, if you're engaging in sexual activity, you are being very risky. You are taking a high risk approach to sex. And to put that into your decision-making model. And so I always come back to their decision-making model. The same with sexting, which comes up all the time too, is there are people under the age of 18 that are being prosecuted for sending naked photos. First of all, we kind of joke, like, did anybody ever want a dick pic? Like, did that ever make anybody like anybody more getting a dick pic? I also say, raise your hand if you've seen a pair of breasts that wasn't intended for your eyes. Almost all hands go up. So first of all, we talk about, and some of the rape cases that we talked about earlier, is that once you take a picture and send it, you have to expect it goes around without your control. So how good of a decision is sexting ever? Like, when is it or why is it ever a good idea? And to put it into the decision model, to think about their pros and cons. And we know the brain isn't fully developed until 25, and so we have to practice this decision making, which is why the more we can do it in the classroom or in any type of safe environment, hopefully the better decisions they'll make. I mean, I think that's why we do all this work. But two people drunk is just not a good idea. I don't know. Hopefully that got closer. by the way, I discuss everything with students. I answer all questions they have. I don't ever say the answer is just because. I don't say it's just because of the law. I don't say no to any alcohol or any drugs. I try to be as real and realistic with them. And still, of course, maintain my job as whatever type of educator I am, and take into consideration they know I could be a mandated reporter, but also to share their experiences with me so that we can talk more honestly and openly and help them.
Thank you. We had a couple more questions come in. In your professional opinion, when is it age appropriate to talk about sexual consent with youth?
Great question. I taught consent grade 1 through 12. I taught consent every single year. So it obviously starts when it's younger. We talk more about personal space. Consent looks more like pushing in the playground or pulling hair. Sexual consent, depending upon your population, I would say as early as, first of all, as early as 3rd and 4th grade, we're talking about the word sex. It comes into play about reproduction. If a 3rd or 4th grader asks me about something that feels like rape or sexual assault, I want to ask more questions. I want to get their frame of reference. I want to understand what they're talking about and help to make sure they're in a safe environment and that to better understand where it's coming from. They may have heard the word totally out of context, or it may be something else that's going on at home. So I'm super sensitive at the, 3rd, 4th grade. I mean, any grade, but 3rd and 4th grade and younger. Sexual consent, certainly touching, we talk about 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. The videotape tea, I start in 6th and 7th grade. But I, know your population. But I think the ideas about students tend to know this stuff before we talk about it anyway, but certainly the ideas of someone touching your body without consent, if you're talking about that as sexual, 3rd and 4th grade for sure. Hopefully that answered questions.
Thank you. Next question. Can you give some ideas on how or why parents need to talk about sex to teens?
Yeah, fabulous. I do a lot of parent workshops. First of all, the kids are going to learn somewhere. We have a choice of whether they want to learn on the playground from their friends or their school bus. I kind of joke that I love the kids, like the middle schoolers that play up, as they call it, and play on high school sports. Those kids are on the buses with students that are much older than them, and they are getting a full sex education on those buses. So first, we have a choice about where the students are going to learn this stuff from. Their friends, from teachers, or from adults at home. I think adults at home would be fabulous. I'd love for the adults in the community and teachers. And the least favorite, of course, is from their friends. I'd love for students to have somebody they can go to with questions. This stuff is challenging. It's hard to navigate. I had, oh my God, I have case after case. I had an 8th grade boy who he asked me, he was fooling around with his girlfriend and she gave him a hand. This is his story. She gave him a hand job. She had come on her hands and then touched her vulva. Could she be pregnant? He spent the whole weekend worrying about whether she could be pregnant or not and didn't know if she was pregnant or could be pregnant, what he could do about it. We had not gotten to to that part of the curriculum yet in 8th grade. And he was petrified all weekend. And so if he had an adult at home, my guess is she wasn't pregnant. My guess is that there was no chance in her being pregnant, but we could have prevented an unwanted pregnancy. So I think there are lots of reasons why having an adult at home or nearby or some trusted adult makes a lot of good reasons. I mean, I can talk on and on about why I think parents, I joke with parents is that they tell their kids, put on your jacket, it's cold outside. Really? Like, we need to teach parents about consent. Like, you might tell the kid, you have to bring your jacket. I don't want to hear your whining later. But go outside, feel the temperature. You listen to your own body. You decide how you feel. Don't let another adult tell you to put on a jacket or not put on a jacket. I mean, I think the more we get in front of parents, and educate parents, the better lives the kids will have on so many levels. We can help parents on so many levels. I don't know, I'm happy to say more, but my guess is there are other questions too.
There are a couple more, but thank you so much for answering that. Do you use a specific model or acronym to teach decision-making?
No, I use the state the problem, which is the first problem because they don't always know exactly what the problem is. Like I use the example, you want to go to frozen yogurt and somebody that you like, I mean, really like, you like, has texted they want to see you. And so the problem is not that the person that likes you texts you, the problem is you can't be in two places at once. And so first we state the problem, then we list all the options. We know the kids' minds go binary, go, don't go. Go to the like, go to the friends. And they need help brainstorming past the two first binary options. You know, I could go with my friends and bring them to the like. I could bring the like to my friends. I could do halftime. I could reschedule the like, I could reschedule my friends. I could do the 0 option and go to none of them and stay home with a headache. And so we brainstorm. Then we list the pros and cons of your top 2 choices. The fourth step is doing a decision. And the most important is reflecting. Most of the time, students reflect on the bad decisions or the decisions they didn't like or the ones they were uncomfortable with. But it's important to reflect on all the decisions they make. And so the amazing ones, we need to reflect and cheer those and be like, wow, that was a great decision you made. Awesome. That made you feel good. You know, that worked for you. Amazing. So I think stating the problem, helping them brainstorm all the different many options, and then reflection are kind of just the keys to decision making. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Next question, do you discuss STDs at all during your discussions, risks, testing, symptoms, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. I do starting in 8th grade, sometimes in 7th if it comes up, but 8th, 9th again, and 10th again, we go through it. We do a lot about how do you ask for testing? And things like I get them used to saying, my body's important to me. I hope your body's important to you. Why don't we both get tested? And then things like sex can just happen organically, right? It can happen naturally. But my body's important to me. I'm hoping your body's important to you. Let's go get tested. And so we practice that phrase in the classroom frequently. My body's important to me. I hope your body's important to you. Let's go get tested. And we talk about when to do that. You know, do you say like, hi, my name is Lisa. I think you're cute. Let's go get tested. Do you do it like, hey, we're both naked. I hope you got tested. And so we talk about ways and timing to do that. And just by brainstorming and having the discussion, the students realize how uncomfortable this topic could be and how so important it is. I do the little, you know, you have sex with so-and-so and they have sex with so-and-so and, you know, how STIs can go around. I don't go into a lot of the kind of the facts about STIs, like how many cases they are or all the different symptoms. I don't find that it's so effective. I do hand them a 1-pager with kind of the grid of the STIs. And then I say, which one are you most fearful of and why? And we brainstorm and discuss that in a group. Is it you're most fearful of HIV that could lead to AIDS? Are you most fearful of herpes because you have it for a lifetime? You know, which one are you the most fearful and why? And that discussion seems more important than the kind of the old-fashioned way of doing it with how many cases and which meds and just, you know, they didn't retain it. It didn't seem so interesting to them. But yeah, we definitely talk about testing. I'm a huge advocate. Before every partner, you need to get tested. Or MISO, actually in school I go by MIXO, MXO in the upper schools, high schools. So, you know, MIXO recommends getting tested before every new partner.
Thank you. Do you discuss any LGBTQ+ topics or conversations with students?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I try to make every conversation as inclusive of all genders, all orientations as much as I possibly can. I had one student ask why I don't teach anal douching. And I try to leave my classes, I say my classes are not how-to classes on anything, but I do go into some safety tips and techniques. But I try to be inclusive of everybody all the time. any scenarios I give are either gender neutral names, or I include all different, everything and anything. So the answer is yes. We spend a lot of time talking about trans. I do a fun pronoun game with the 4th graders where the entire paragraph, 3 paragraphs, has no pronouns. And then every time somebody uses a pronoun associated with any of them, I ask why they think that, where'd they get that from, what in the paragraph led them to believe that. And by the time we're done with that class, they have completely given up guessing anybody's gender, because they realize that they are making kind of false accusations all over. A pronoun game. So we just, I do a paragraph, 3 paragraphs of the story that has no pronouns in the whole thing. What else do I do for pronouns? We do a lot on transgender. We have transgender speakers. We do a lot on transgender stuff. One of the funny things is when I teach sex in the 4th grade, I was teaching this lesson on sex in 4th grade, on reproduction actually. And I say, everybody comes from a sperm and an egg, and everybody grows in a uterus. And I say, but not all sperm and egg get together the same way. Hands go up. And I'm like, yeah, okay. What do you want to tell me? And they said, I came from a sperm donor because I have 2 mommies. And the next hand goes up and says, well, and the uterus that I used was from a surrogate because I had 2 dads. And I joke with parents that those kids that came from old-fashioned sex, if that's how the sperm and egg got together, they haven't had those discussions with their kids. But the kids that came from all the other ways that sperm and egg can get together, they know how they came into creation. They know their creation story. They know their birth story. But old-fashioned sex, kids that came from sex, they don't know their creation story. Anyway, that goes back to parents' question. What other questions do we have?
Yeah, someone asked if you could share. Did I cut someone off? Okay. Someone asked if you could share the pronoun game. Is there any way you could send me maybe an email of an example story you do, and I'll send it out to folks, or
Sure,
would that work for you?
I will see if I can find one of my, yep. Another game I do with the older kids, more on ethics, it's a scenario where so-and-so, one person cheats on so-and-so, one person shares it on social media, and it's a whole series of maybe activities we might not be such a fan of. And I did it with seniors and juniors in high school. And then they have to say, they have to rank like who's kind of the best person, who's kind of the worst person. And it just is great discussion. Is it the person that cheated? Is it the person that didn't tell their best friend? Is it the one that posted it on social media? And it's just, it's all fruitful discussion. I mean, that's what I think is the best way of educating students anyway. It's just all this fruitful discussion.
Thank you. We do have about 3 minutes left. Please feel free to keep sending in any questions. I'll go ahead and read our next one. What are conversation points to empower youth to get support if they have been in those situations? And by those situations, I assume situations where they didn't consent to sexual activity.
Yeah. I think it's really hard. I think it's really hard when in one of the classes, somebody realizes that they might have been sexually assaulted. And the look on people's faces is kind of horrifying for anybody who's had to kind of deliver the message that maybe the student has been sexually assaulted. I think a reminder that they're not alone. I think sometimes the statistics about how many people are sexually assaulted is comforting. I think providing the resources like RAIN is an easy one. I suggest people call RAIN actually just to kind of practice. You can call up and say, in real life, but, use it before it becomes too traumatic. But I just think encouraging that they're not alone, and that just like with mental health, like to help reduce the stigma, we just keep talking about it and it's not their fault. help them, give them resources, and just, encouragement. We can't force anybody to ever report. We can't force anybody to get help, although we'd certainly like to. And trying to see if we can get them to a trusted adult. If there's a trusted adult in the school or some other program, get them over to a trusted adult. Just help them with trust.
Thank you. I think this will be our last question based on the time. Do you mention revenge porn in classrooms with older students?
Yes. First of all, we talk about how bad sexting or porn will cause. By the way.
Oh, sorry, Lisa. I tried to help you out with your audio. It sounded really funky on my end.
All right. One of the things, I was doing one of my sexual assault case days, and a boy from the back of the class raised his hand and said, "Are we going to talk about domestic abuse?" And I don't talk a lot about domestic abuse at all. And so at first I said no. And then I said, well, why wait? What's going on? And he said that he wanted to share something that he never shared with anyone before. And could he read something? Now, I'm not prepared for this. I have no idea what he's going to say, but it's an opportunity from the kid in the back of the room who hardly ever speaks. And so the space must have been safe enough and the topics were touchy enough, but I guess we had to go there. And he read a poem. It'll make me cry, but he read a poem about how he had witnessed his mom being abused and how he was a little 8-year-old boy in the room and in the corner and in the closet, and how he didn't help protect her and how he didn't stop it. And he shared that for the first time ever in a classroom. And so, I push the envelope. I allow things to happen in the classrooms. I help him get his support. I try to help the other students who were hearing it for the first time. But I'm thankful that he felt comfortable enough to share. So I think we do great work, and I think we need to continue to do great work and to take a few risks and make these spaces so that the kids have a safe adult that they can share with. But yeah, I do mention revenge porn. I mention a lot of the terrible things because it's important that students know that things can happen. Sorry, I wish I could end on a brighter note.
That is okay. Thank you so much for this presentation. We are about a minute over, so I thank you all for staying on. It would be lovely if you all could fill out an evaluation for us. I just put the link in the chat, and I will also send out another email following this presentation with that eval link, as well as Lisa's PowerPoint slides. But thank you all so much, and thank you, Lisa. This was great.
Thank you. Have a great day.
I'll leave the room open a little bit longer in case anyone is clicking on the eval link.
Oh, interested in bystander interventions.
Yes, Robin is actually works with HCET as a public ally. So Robin, if you wanted to ask any more about that. It looks like you're talking, but you're unmuted, or you're muted, Robin.
I heard the case of 2 adults who were both drunk. Someone intervened and separated them, but only one person held responsible. Yeah.
All right. Does anyone else have any other questions before I close the room?
Ooh, it took me that long to find my cursor from the 3 screens to hit unmute. Darn thing gets lost on me. Yes, I did hear about a case. It was actually on like a reality show, like a Love Island or a Bachelor. I don't know, one of those things where they separated people because they had gotten them so drunk, and they were obviously continuing it into a sexual relationship that was going to be in a drunken manner. And the fallout was definitely one-sided. And it worried me. As a feminist, as a woman, I was like, I don't want to infantilize women and make her not as responsible for that situation as people typically would make him out to be. And it's not always a him, her thing. I get that, but it's concerning to me.
Yeah. There's a lot of work to do, right?
There's a lot of work there, I guess. It was just like, both of you deserve a bad hangover. Both of you deserve to take a look at your behavior. Both of you deserve a few things, but it's not just one person making a mistake and the other person being like, oh, I was just I wasn't responsible.
No, it would be great if we could, first of all, it'd be great if we could have these discussions. It'd be great if we could have any discussions, right? Like, and it'd be great if we could have people held accountable for their actions. But
I just wondered if that had come up at all, because it's interesting to me that it can become, because there are definitely many cases where it does need to be one-sided. One person is responsible, but it's not always the case. And you add alcohol or drugs into it. And I don't know, I think adults need to be responsible for their own behavior. And I guess it's so individual cases maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, I try to get the students to talk about cases, because you start to see some of the complexities and things that you don't know in the cases. And, is it their word against their word? And, whose word are you believing? And no one else is in the room. And how do you know? And, for the students, though, if there are pictures involved, we have problems, right? This is where we start to have, that's why taking pictures of these sexual assault cases.
Right.
But what's interesting is when I do workshops with parents, the parents will often go to defending the boy. I'm a parent, I can tell whether they have a boy or, what type of gender child they have by the way they ask the questions. What happens if someone's wrongly accused? You have a boy. What happens if someone's not listening to me? How do I get the authorities to listen? It's unfortunate, but, lots of times, and I can tell gender by the parents' questions.
By their questions. Okay.
Really unfortunate.
True. Very true. It's a problem.
Yes. Well, thanks for coming and sharing.
Yes. Yep. Thank you for the information. I was looking forward to this webinar all day. So
Thanks, Robin.
thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much, Lisa. I will touch base with you after this and send you an email so we can make sure you get your payment. And then we also send you an optional just demographic survey for all of our consultants. Again, totally optional, but would love if you filled that out.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. That was great.
All right, ciao.
Bye.